What is up, everyone? This is Seth Parnell, the minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 93 of the Midweek Bible Study. I hope that you are doing well. Hope everything is going your way. We really appreciate you being here, and hope this is something that helps you out. Hope this is something that benefits you. I know it's always a good thing when we're able to come together and study the Word of God, and so we really appreciate you being here. We always want to let you know that you have an invitation, that you are welcome. You're at the Portia Church of Christ. And right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, and 6 o'clock for Sunday night and Wednesday night. So if you're in the area, we hope you can come and see us sometime. Come and join in our worship. We'd love to worship with you. We would love to see you. Excuse me. And also, we want to know if you have any questions or any comments, about what we study tonight, or about what we look at throughout these studies with the Midweek Bible Study. I hope you can get in contact with us. We would love to hear from you. Or if you're someone who has some suggestions for a future, topic or a future episode, then feel free to drop that as well. We would love to hear from you in that regard as well. And as I said, I don't think I mentioned, but at Portia, we are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia. And so, hope you can come join us if you're in the area. But it has been a absolute, beautiful day. Here, I think it's like 71 degrees, which is almost the perfect temperature. It's hard to beat a 71 degree, sunny day, here in Arkansas. I mean, that's about it, as good as it gets. Great running weather. I went running today, and it's fantastic, weather to get out in. And so, hopefully, if you were someone who likes to go outside, hopefully you took advantage of that and get outside today. It's a great day to do it. But before we get started here, we've got two people have chimed in. We have the Dunlaps are here. I hope that everything is going well. I hope that you're feeling better. I know that you've been under the weather a little bit, and so we hope that you are feeling good and feeling better. We appreciate you guys being here. You guys are always here, and we appreciate you guys supporting us. And we also got Nancy. She is here as well. Hope that you're doing good. Hope that things are going your way. And we appreciate you being here, as well. But tonight, we are going to take a look at the book of Numbers, Numbers chapter 20, and an interesting story, and where we find a rather agitated leader, a rather stressed leader, at least seems, and a group of people that are kind of hard to deal with. And what's usually called the story of the waters at Meribah. This is a story that involves Moses and his interaction with the people concerning a lack of water. And it's usually a pretty well-known story. We remember this event, but I think it's good to go back every once in a while and take a look at these stories, to see what they have for us and what we can gain, from them, because there's usually so much we can get, from these stories that the Bible gives us. And so, if you take a look here at Numbers, this is Numbers chapter 20, and if you go down to about the story is set up here in verses 2 down through 9. We kind of get the pretext for the story. We kind of get the situation of what's going on and why this is happening and what's going down, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. But here in verses 10 down through about verse 13, this is what the book says. It says, "Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, 'Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?' And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly. And the congregation drank, and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 'Because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself to be holy. As I said, we're going to have to go back and get the context of the story, but here we find that, Israel is traveling. They're in a place called the wilderness, which is not always too hospitable in order for people and for livestock and such. Sometimes resources such as water and such as food can be rather scarce. We know that here the problem is water. They don't have any water for their people or their animals. We know at a later time it's going to be food. They'll say that we don't have any food for ourselves. And of course, we know in that case, the Lord, he sends manna upon the land, and they're able to gather manna, and that is something that sustains them. And so, this was a difficult journey, going across the wilderness. We know that sometimes, and for good reason at times, we come down hard on Israel because they don't come across in a very positive light. They don't come across as very, very good people to be around. But this was a hard journey. Traveling from Egypt to the Promised Land, and the route that they took, it was not something that was easy, and they had to rely on God, severely in order to get through here. And so when we look at this story and when we see, what happens, they are not doing too well. They are so they have a lack of water, and they have a lot of complaints to give to Moses. If we go back up here to verses 2, and it kind of spells it out here. It says, "Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into the wilderness, that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt and bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." This is their complaint. They come before the Lord, and they say a number of things here that is pertinent, and we'll see that as we go on. But they say first, the Bible spells out. It says that there was no water for the congregation, so there is a need. There is worry about their ability to survive in this environment, and so that kind of plays in the decision making that they have. It says so. In order to do something against this, they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. Instead of being, trusting, instead of being a group of people that knew that God would not lead them out here for no reason or for evil reasons, instead they came against Moses and they came against Aaron, and they blamed them for the problems that they were having. As if Aaron and Moses, if they themselves, without God, if they could, just provide, these things out of thin air. We know through the power of God he could, and he does make this happen in the story. But it brings the question, with ourselves, how do we approach, uneasy times? How do we approach, bad times? How do we react to when these things happen in our life? Because just like it's the journey that Israel had from Egypt to the Promised Land, and how it was not easy, and they had several moments in where things were hard and things were not good. The life of a Christian is the same way. We have times in which we get beaten down. We have times in which we struggle, times in which we fall into temptation, and we make mistakes, and we do all these things that we regret. Sometimes we have regrets with what we do. But how do we react to those? How do we react to those times when things aren't as good as we would like for them to seem like on the outside? And we like to present an image of everything is good, everything is fine, everything is just moving along, like it should. But the reality of situations are that that's not always the case. Sometimes we are people who are just getting by, or someone who is worried about what the future might hold, like these people were. But how do we react to these situations? Do we go to God? Do we commit our trust to God? Do we get to work ourselves? Or do we follow the example of the people here? Do we find someone to blame? Do we find someone to put our worries and our and the responsibility of our struggles, and we blame an individual or something else for that, whether it's responsible for it or not? It's easy to throw around blame. There's some things that are easier to throw, than others. You talk about a football, football season just ended. Some quarterbacks can throw a football, 50, 60 yards, 70 yards. They can throw it really far because it was built for that purpose. And some people can throw blame pretty far as well. They can throw it and in something that is very easy, to throw. But a lot of times, throwing blame around doesn't usually end up in something that is constructive or something that is good, but rather sometimes it only degrades the situation, as was the case here. They come against Moses and they come against Aaron and they say, we have no water, and basically it's your fault. It's your fault for leading us out here. Because if you look in verse 3, here he says, and the people quarreled with Moses and said, would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. And if you remember, this is probably a reference back to chapter 16. If you look at chapter 16 in Numbers, in the book of Numbers, we find the rebellion of Abiram, of Dothan, and Korah. These were individuals that rebelled against Moses in this case, and it didn't turn out well for them. They came against Moses and they said, the whole congregation is holy. Why do you set yourself above us? Basically saying, what makes you so special? Why are you the one to lead us? I mean, anyone could have your job, Moses. Why do you setting yourself up as a prince over us? Actually use that wording to say that you're setting yourself up as a king or a prince over the people when you have no authority. But the thing that they didn't want to understand is that the authority that Moses had was given to him by God. God said, you go and you deliver these people from Egypt and you lead them to the promised land. That was God's decision. But yet they thought that they were better suited for this, and so they withstood Moses in this case. We know, if you remember, the Moses, he sends for them because he wants to talk to them. He wants to get to the bottom of this, but they refuse to come. They refuse to even talk to Moses, and so God, he sends an earthquake, and the earth splits open, and the tents of all these people who led the rebellion, they all fell into the ground, and they were all killed in that instance, alongside about 250 elders who had joined in this rebellion. They were also killed before the Lord. And after that, shortly after that, the congregation, it says that they grumbled about this, and they came against Moses and Aaron again, in which God sent a plague among them, and where over around 15,000 were killed, in that instance. And so we don't know the exact number, but maybe, approximately 16,000 people were killed in that instance. And so the people here are saying, it may have been better for us, to be like those people, to be killed by fire or to be killed, by that earthquake, because where we are now is not good. We are just slowly dying out here, dying of thirst because we have no water. And as I said before, this was all put on Moses. Because they say, this is your fault, for leading us out here. Because they continue on and they say, because this is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. Well, why would they say something like that? Why would they, mention those things? Well, they had heard, these promises that they had been given, that there is a land that is flowing, with milk and honey, a land that is abundant, a land that is bountiful, a land that is, going to be a great place to live. And they look around themselves and they say, this is no promised land here. There's nothing good about this land, but yet we are desperate and we are in need. This is no, promised land. How can you lead us out here into this dangerous place? They they were doubting that the promises of God were even real at all, that he was going to be someone that's going to come through, with his promises. And we know that brings up, a point for us, as well. When we look at the promises of God that he has given us, he they looked around at their present circumstances and they saw that things were bad. They were not ideal. They saw that the promises of God hadn't been fulfilled in that instant, and so they became impatient. They became impatient with the timeline of the promises of God, and they said, you just brought us out here in order to die. You just brought us out here in order to be destroyed by this awful land. But we as people, we can't let our present circumstances dictate our trust in God, because God, one of the things about the promises of God is that they endure, through time, through the things of this world, through suffering that you may go through. Those promises can endure, through that. They're something that can keep going even when you want to quit, even when you want to, call it, give up and throw in the towel. The promises of God, they endure throughout all of that. And so we know that what he has promised, he is going to fulfill. Whether that's going to be something beyond the time of this world, and that would be the promise of eternal life, the promise of heaven, the promise of that place that Jesus said, "I will go to prepare a place for you." Or whether it's something in this life where he says, "I will watch over my children, I will sustain them, I will uphold them, I will I will keep them in my loving hand." We know that God's going to give us what we need. He's going to give us He's going to give us what we need in order to get through this life. And sometimes we may disagree with God. We may say, "Well, God, why are you making me go through this suffering? Why are you making me going through these hard times?" But being a follower of God and being someone who holds his promises doesn't mean that everything is going to be smooth. Doesn't mean that everything is going to be easy and everything's going to be convenient. But sometimes in order to grow, in order to reach that final destination, we have to go through this rough road. We have to go through these hard times. But that shouldn't deter us, but that should only strengthen our commitment, to God, because we know that he's going to pull us through this. These people became impatient. They thought that God was taking too long to bring them to this promised land, and we shouldn't fall into that same trap. It's easy to become impatient. It's easy to say, why aren't things good right now? Why can't this process speed up? But we don't know the timing that God has for us, and sometimes we just have to work patiently, knowing that God is going to do good things in our life, and that we can trust in that, because this is not it's not an attitude that these people had, and it was something that wasn't pleasing to God. But we know that this is something when we look at how Moses reacts to this. I mean, as the verses that we read here in verses 10 down through about 13. As you can imagine, as you can see, the being the leader of Israel, being someone who led Israel in this case, it's not an easy job. But you think about things that are stressful, things that cause you anxiety, things that are probably give you some gray hairs. And that was the job that Moses had. I don't think anybody would be envious of the task that Moses had in managing these people because of these constant complaints, because of these accusations that came after him pretty frequently. This was a stressful situation a lot of times, and Moses, he had a lot to deal with. And but it's good to have Janet here. Hope that you're doing well. Thank you for jumping in here. We appreciate you being here. But this is a difficult job, and if you go up down to verse 1 here in Numbers chapter 20, we see that Miriam, the sister of Moses, she dies. In the up here it says, and the people of Israel and the whole congregation came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. So Miriam has she's just passed away, and a lot of times when you lose a family member, that's something that causes causes some stress, causes some sorrow. Moses could still be grieving over the loss of his sister, and then here comes the people saying, why have you brought us out here to die? Or this is your fault, for the fact that we don't have any water. And so it still wasn't the right decision, but you can kind of understand why Moses reacts in the way that he does. When we go down here to verse 11, or in verse 10, it says, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their livestock. God, he had specific instructions for Moses. He said, go out and speak to this rock. Tell this rock to bring forth water, and they will have water in order to survive or to sustain themselves. But instead, Moses, he has this statement. He says, must we bring forth water for you rebels? He calls them, he kind of insults them, and he calls them rebels because they were oftentimes rebelling against not only his authority but also God's authority, as well. And he strikes the rock twice. And while water still comes out, water still flows out for the people, God is not pleased with Moses. And we have to look at this to understand why God wasn't pleased. Why was God not happy with the way that Moses acted in this situation? Well, if you look down to verse 12, it says, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. And these are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself holy. God wanted to show Israel that if they trust in him, if they look to him as holy, if they regard him as holy and just, are patient with his promises, that he was going to provide for them. He was going to provide their needs and allow them to reach their destination that he promised, that land that was flowing with milk and honey. But instead of giving this to God, instead of communicating that this fact to the people, Moses, he kind of lashes out at the people, and he says, do we have to do this for you? Do me and Aaron have to provide this for you? And he strikes the rock out of frustration or out of anger, and instead of pointing to God, he points to himself and Aaron and what they could do. And that was not something that that was pleasing to God. There's always a cost. There's always a cost when we're someone who takes credit for something that God does. There's always a cost for that. We don't ever want to be a people that take credit where we shouldn't, but we should always be thankful for what God provides for us. Because I think any of us could say, if we took a good hard look at our life, that we've been blessed immensely. There's so many good things that God provides for us. And we don't want to take credit for these things and say, well, this is what I have amassed, this is what I have gathered, and while we leave God out of the picture. Because there's always a cost for that, and it's never something that is good. And Moses, he was getting older. He was someone that was he was getting closer to the end of his time as a leader of Israel. But he makes this mistake here. And we know that he'll eventually be able to go and see the promised land. He's taken up to a mountain. He's able to look out, and see the land that he led Israel to, which was something that probably, pleased him, was probably something that was good for him to be able to do. But yet, he makes this mistake here, and we have to be careful not to make the same mistake, ourselves. We don't want to be someone who treats God, in that manner. But we want to be someone who is always, looking to praise Him and to thank Him for everything that He has done, for us. And so I hope this is something that has been beneficial to you. I hope this is something that has benefited you in a good way. If you ever have any questions, or comments about what we studied tonight, then please feel free to get in contact with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you think about this story. What do you think about Moses striking the rock? Any lessons or any applications you get from the story? I'd like to know what you think about what occurred here in Numbers chapter 20, and because it's a good story. I think one that we can learn from, one that we can gain some insight from, as far as what we do as individuals. But I think that's all that we have tonight. We will be back here next Thursday for another edition of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope you can join us then. If this has done you any good, if you think anybody could benefit from it, please feel free to share it and let them know about what we do here on Thursday nights. But until then, we hope that you go out and hope that you be that light of the world. Hope you go out and do good things. You live out your faith and glorify God in everything that you do. We'll see you next time.